How many professional baseball players have reached 4,000 career hits? Easy, right? It's two, Pete Rose and Ty Cobb. End of list, right? Well, maybe you think it's three players, because Ichiro recorded 4,000 hits when you combine MLB and Japan. Well, what if I told you it's actually way more than that? There's like more than 20 players who combined to have 4,000 hits across all of professional baseball. Hi, I'm Adam Darowski, Executive Director of Design and Sports Reference. Along with researchers Scott Simkus and Von Spalding, I've been working to identify every player in the history of professional baseball to reach 4,000 career hits. For professional hits, we're including the major leagues, which is the AL and NL, and of course the Negro leagues as well. Minor leagues, and that can be anything within quote unquote organized baseball or even foreign minor leagues. And then any competitive foreign, winter, or independent leagues. And we're also including international tournaments, thinking of this kind of like soccer where there's club and country, where they represented their country or their team in the Caribbean Series. And the Inter-American Series was a series that was played for a few years when the Caribbean Series wasn't active. And then, of course, we all know and love the World Baseball Classic. So what are we not including? That's also an important question. We're not including spring training games or exhibition games, all-star games, or in-season exhibitions, or we're not including amateur games like high school or college, and we're not including instructional leagues either. And what we have here is a list of 23 players who have done this, and I'm going to go through them for you in some groups. First, I'm going to hit the couple guys we know. We know that Pete Rose had a bunch of hits in the AL and NL, and he had a bunch more in the minors. You may not know that he had a season in Venezuela as well, where he collected 65 hits and then 10 more in the postseason. And then Cobb, it's really just his major and minor league totals that get him over 4,400. But you can see on the leaderboard that he's only 7th place, where some might expect him to be second right behind Rose. So next we're going to look at the players who are in between Rose and Cobb, and that starts with Julio Franco, one of my favorite players of all time. Not only did he have a very long and very good major league career that is perhaps Hall of Fame worthy in itself, but he also played extensively in the minors before his career started in the majors, and then also in the Dominican Republic, Mexico, Japan, South Korea. So just an extensive career that adds up to 4,463 hits when it's all said and done. Ichiro, of course, we already mentioned him. He had over 3,000 in the AL and NL, but also 1,278 in Japan. But we can also add things like the Japanese minor leagues and the Hawaiian Winter League. And of course, the World Baseball Classic, where he starred for Japan as well. Puts him number 3 on the list at 4,635. Minnie Miñoso, the Hall of Famer. So he played many years in the AL and NL, but before that, he played in the Negro Leagues, which are included there further down the list. But he also played extensively in his native Cuba, in Mexico, in the minor leagues and winter leagues in the US, Mexico, even a little bit in the Dominican Republic. 4,563 hits for number 5 all time. And then Carrillo. This is like the first name, the highest name on the list that I had never heard of, but he had over 2,500 hits in the Mexican League and then nearly another 1,500 in the Mexican Winter League. He was an original Marlin in 93 and 94 as well, and briefly appeared for the Brewers before that, collecting 48 hits in the AL and NL. But he's at 4,573 hits, and that leaves us with like number 2. We still haven't gotten to number 2. So if you're wondering who that is, you know, you're not alone, because a lot of people were very surprised to see this name. But we're sticking in Mexico for Hector Espino. And he was essentially the Babe Ruth of Mexico, just a massive star. 2,752 hits in Mexico, and then another 1,824 in the Winter League. And if you add up his home runs from those, you're just shy of 800 home runs as well. So this is an absolutely magnificent player. He only briefly played in the minor leagues and collected another 30 hits there and 2 more in the postseason. And he was a star in the Caribbean Series, 4,794 hits. So the next group we're going to talk about is the players who we knew years ago had 4,000 hits, thanks to an article by my researcher friend, Scott Simkus. He originally published an article in 2013 that listed the 9 known members. So that includes many of the ones that we already touched on, but a few more that I'm going to touch on here. So Henry Aaron is no surprise. He had over 3,700 in the major leagues, but he also had several minor league hits. He had some in the Negro leagues, but also in Puerto Rico. And we've got postseason hits from all of those as well to put him at number 9 on the list. Derek Jeter, when you combine his majors and minors and a few WBC hits, he totals 4,243 to get him in the top 10. Very impressive. Arnold Statz. So he was a huge star in the Pacific Coast League early in the 20s and 30s. He had over 3,000 hits in the PCL. He also did play for a few years in the AL and NL and did well with 737 hits. And he also picked up 27 in the California Winter League, which is a really interesting league in history because it was the first integrated league in the United States. So he was playing with some Negro League stars there. So he's number 13 on the list. And Stan Musial, little more case closed here, just majors and minors, gets him over 4,000. Stan the Man is number 20 on the list. So the next group is one of my favorites because it's like players that you know, but may not have had any idea that they were 4,000 hit men. And I think the first guy on the list is a good example of this. César Tovar, he's probably most famous for playing all 9 positions in one game. He had over 1,500 hits, a very solid career, but I was shocked to see that he had 4,000. He had over 1,200 in his native Venezuela, another 1,000 plus in the minors. He also appeared in Mexico and then the Caribbean Series. And then for a few years when it was referred to as the Inter-American Series, he appeared there as well. Sticking with Venezuela, another player who similarly surprised me was Vic Davalillo. So he had 1,500 in Venezuela, another 1,100 in the AL and NL, but also extensively played in Mexico, the U.S. minors, the Venezuelan minors, Mexican independent leagues. He was everywhere. And once again, in Venezuela, and Bobby Abreu surprised me for a couple reasons. Number one is because he walked so much that I was surprised he would get that many hits. And then number two, you know, Bobby Abreu made a lot of money. A lot of guys on this list just kept playing forever because that was their job and they needed to continue making money. Bobby Abreu didn't need to do that. He just kept playing and playing year round for Venezuela because, you know, he loved representing his country, and you can see that in the tournaments he played in as well. Now going to Cuba, we've got Tony Pérez, who collected over 2,700 AL and NL hits, but he's also a Hall of Famer in Puerto Rico, played many years there. And you can see the hit total, the postseason hit total. And then in the Caribbean Series, he was representing Puerto Rican teams there as well. And now we have an ultra-modern player with Miguel Cabrera. Of course, he had over 3,000 hits in the majors, but he also had a bunch in the minors and several in Venezuela. One thing that stands out to me is that postseason total in Venezuela. Venezuela has a very extensive postseason with several rounds. So players like Cabrera, when they move over to Venezuela after the season, can play a lot of postseason games and compile a lot of hits that way. So the next group of players is the group that I don't know if I had heard of any of these players when I started this project. And you can see there's some guys that are pretty far up the list here that are still left to go. So let's do it. Jesus Sommers is actually the son of Lonnie Sommers, who was a Negro Leagues player. And Jesus became the first player to reach 3,000 hits in the Mexican League, and that's the Mexican Summer League. He also had over 1,000 more in the Mexican Winter League. What's interesting about Sommers here, too, is that he's the only player on this entire list who never played in the U.S. majors or minors. Next, we go back to Venezuela, where we have Teolindo Acosta. In his 20s, he played in the U.S. minors in the Cardinal system, and he was a great hitter with a lot of speed, but he never got the call. In his 30s, he decided to go play in Mexico instead. And all the while, he was playing in his native Venezuela as well. So he's really interesting, where he's got over 1,200 hits in 3 different contexts. It's quite the accomplishment. This is another pretty modern player who, you know, played with the Blue Jays in the 90s, and I barely, if at all, remembered him, Robert Pérez. And he's got a long list of competitions here. 1,372 hits in his native Venezuela, nearly 1,200 more in the minors. He had over 500 in Mexico. He played in KBO in South Korea, had 126 in the majors, played in Japan in both the NPB and the minors. And he's the only player here who also played in Italy. Nelson Barrera, if Hector Espino is the Babe Ruth of Mexico, I think Barrera might be the Lou Gehrig. He's right there in terms of hits and home runs, right behind Espino, just not quite there. 2,934 hits in Mexico, over 600 home runs overall. and extensively got hits in the Mexican minors and the Winter League, and played in the Caribbean Series, and very briefly here with the Buffalo Bisons and the White Sox system, played in the U.S. minors. And then we go back to Cuba, and we go back a little ways for Hector Rodríguez, who did appear in the Negro Leagues before joining the White Sox for 1 year in 1952. But he played extensively in the minor leagues, long career with the Toronto Maple Leafs, the baseball team, not the hockey team, up in Canada. And his 1,245 hits in Cuba is that pro league's all-time leader. So that leaves us with two more guys. And these are the two that joined the club since I did my presentation in June. And they joined in very different ways. So at our presentation, we noted that Robinson Canó, the Yankees star, was closing in on 4,000 professional hits. And I'm happy to report that in September, he reached that milestone. He now sits at 4,001. So this one was cool because I feel like he was the first player to celebrate his 4,000th pro hit in real time. Over 2,600 in the AL and NL. He had over 500 in the minors. But has been playing in Mexico the last couple of years, and he has also played a few seasons in his native Dominican Republic. And in the second to last game of the Mexican League playoffs, he collected hit number 4,000, which was celebrated on the field. They collected the ball, and he was interviewed about it, and it was super cool to see that happen. And then literally just days after that, the contrast here is interesting. We found the 4,000th hit for a player from Mexico who last played over 50 years ago and died many years ago, Vinicio García. Garcia is also known as Chico Garcia. He played for the first Baltimore Orioles team, collected 7 hits there. But over 1,600 in the Mexican League, over 1,500 in the U.S. minors, played in several Mexican winter leagues. He played in Cuba. We're very excited to get Vinicio Garcia not only past 4,000, but he jumped all the way up to 15th on the list. So while MLB's 4,000 hit club may only be 2 players, the list to reach 4,000 hits in professional baseball extends well beyond that. And it continues to grow, not only with future players, but as we continue to uncover more data about the great players of the past. Thanks for joining us on this journey, and be sure to subscribe to the Sports Reference YouTube channel.